For more than 50 years, BPI has been fighting for racial, economic, and social justice. And to understand where we're going, it's important to understand where we've been.
This was a period of turmoil in the life of the country. The country needed new directions, a new sense of morality.
And so it was so important to have a voice who was able to demand rights on behalf of the residents and to look at what was happening in the city through the lens of those people whose voices had historically not been represented.
BPI was founded by Gordon Sherman, who was the chief executive officer of Midas Muffler. He felt that business and professional people had an obligation to help solve the inequities of society. Mayor Daley wanted to build an airport right off Lake Michigan in downtown Chicago.
And can you imagine traffic to the airport over a causeway? It was an absolutely crazy idea.
So BPI really was responsible for mobilizing an incredible communications campaign to really mount opposition.
The "Don't Do It in the Lake" slogan took hold. I think it was instrumental in killing off that strange idea. In the 2 decades of the 50s and 60s, Chicago built 18,000 public housing units. But where were they built? They were built almost exclusively in black neighborhoods.
Chicago was at the time often called the most segregated city in the country, and there was no better evidence than public housing in Chicago. Very isolated, very dense.
The clearest example of that was, of course, the several developments that were built along the Dan Ryan. High-rise housing, thousands and thousands of apartments.
It was discriminatory and created concentrated poverty and needed to be addressed legally.
Gautreaux is one of the longest-running civil rights lawsuits in the country. BPI's role in that litigation is to represent the class of public housing residents seeking to redress race discrimination.
The initial remedy, a so-called scattered site program, where future building was supposed to take place primarily in white neighborhoods rather than black neighborhoods.
That case proceeded until it was decided ultimately by the Supreme Court of the United States. Alex Polikoff was the lead attorney. He had won unanimously on behalf of the Gautreaux public housing plaintiffs, so a remarkable victory.
BPI has played an important role for decades in its representation of public housing residents, working with the Chicago Housing Authority as sometimes partner, as sometimes critic, as catalyst for change.
BPI became a trusted partner and collaborator with government, with the residents, to ensure that as dense public housing was being demolished, that what grew in its place had support and resources.
The receiver steps into the shoes of the Public Housing Authority, develop what the plan for the redevelopment was, which was very community resident driven.
Now, investment is moving into those communities, and over the long haul, I think it's going to have a tremendous effect.
This is not about bricks and mortar only. This is about changing people's lives.
The mismanagement with respect to the nuclear power plants was egregious, and the ratepayers were being asked to pay for it. It lasted for years and years. It was immensely complicated.
Just like David and Goliath, here are the few BPI attorneys, one of whom was actually a summer intern, going to court.
In the end, Goliath was soundly beaten, and Commonwealth Edison was forced to pay refunds of over $1.3 billion.
We have a number of fellows who are here, who are really at the early stages of their careers, and they bring new perspectives and a lot of energy.
It's important to have different perspectives and opinions in this, and being able to bring in my lived reality and my lived experience, especially as a Latina, is important to the work of BPI.
The idea is you're going to come to BPI and work with us, whether it's for a month or two or a year or two or even more. You're going to get something out of this.
A lot of our fellows and a lot of our interns have gone on to serve the public in a number of ways.
It just opened up this whole world for me. It really made me want to dedicate my life to that kind of work.
There was a real need for more affordable housing in the whole Chicago region, not just in the city of Chicago.
And jobs were increasingly moving to communities where there was no affordable housing.
Teachers, firefighters, they work in the community and they can't live there.
BPI came to me with their big idea, which was to require that communities of opportunity, communities where the jobs were, also develop housing for the workers who work there.
We worked with a coalition of affordable housing advocates and created state legislation. So it was a landmark piece of legislation that has really helped to make a change.
BPI had worked for years in the area of education, pushing for smaller classroom sizes, waging a constitutional battle for equitable funding for schools in Illinois. And one thing we learned is the importance of starting young.
So BPI's devoted a lot of its work over the last few years in education really around directly working with community and parents to create those kinds of opportunities.
BPI was really the force behind bringing together a community coalition made up of parents, residents, educators, and other stakeholders all coming together to really focus on the developmental needs of kids age 0 to 8 in the Altgeld-Riverdale community.
That collaboration has seen pre-K enrollments go way up, and BPI has been central to this community-wide effort to really open the eyes of these kids to the world of opportunities that are available to them.
MacArthur Foundation selected BPI as only one of 15 institutions to receive this award worldwide. It was confirmation, affirmation, that BPI's work is important and it is having an impact. They wanted to transform their system, juvenile justice in Illinois, from one that was really corrections-based to one that was more rehabilitative, more treatment-focused.
The work with BPI was centered around how do we get to this vision that we all see of a place where we see kids who come in conflict with the law as, human children who need some help, and that our job is to help them be successful.
As a result of that plan being in place, the number of incarcerated youth in Illinois youth prisons has declined from about 1,200 to less than 300 today.
The settlement agreement sets out the roadmap for what we hope will ultimately be the resolution and the bringing to reality of the relief of that lawsuit.
No one could have imagined that there would still be a case today, but change happens in lots of different ways, and because we're willing to stay in the fight for so long, you do eventually see change.
Our country, our state, and municipalities have created policies that have led to the overcriminalization and mass incarceration, particularly in Black and brown communities. And we're working to change that.
We have too many of our residents in the state of Illinois ensnared in the criminal legal system and incarcerated in the Department of Corrections.
We work to decrease contacts with the criminal legal system and to mitigate the harms experienced by people who are incarcerated.
Our work is about reducing the size of that system, reducing opportunities for people to be trapped in that system, and also in recognizing the dignity and humanity of people who are currently incarcerated.
The video of the murder of Laquan McDonald went public, and there were protests and much more focus on the challenges of policing and the need for police reform.
BPI helped form a coalition called GAPA that worked almost 5 years to build from the ground up a community accountability structure over the Chicago Police Department.
All throughout that process, BPI was playing a critical role in working with the community, but also working with government actors, serving as that incredibly important go-between. And a lot of that work has culminated most recently in the passage of ECPS, Empowering Communities for Public Safety.
There was a lot of robust engagement in order to get to this point, but it really started with community.
BPI's work in the public interest has really been about righting wrongs.
We work in partnership with communities, with neighborhoods, with individuals across Chicago and across Illinois to move from vision to action.
They don't just do law. They build the coalitions to build support for it.
You can't just have a bunch of policy wonks pushing to get stuff done. You need to make sure that folks who have roots in the community are just as invested.
Over the years, BPI helped to spawn a number of organizations. You might say that BPI was a kind of incubator.
This is an organization that follows through. They think of the policy, they research it, they write it, they gather support for it and build coalitions around it, and then they implement it.
It requires tenacity. It requires continuous effort, and that's been a hallmark of many of the things that BPI has done over the years.
BPI is at a moment now, a lot like the moment of our founding, where the calls for justice are urgent, and when we are being called to live into our values with action.
I think BPI has to continue to do what it has always done, and that is to be the advocate, be the voice, be the legal foundation upon which social justices move forward.
Now is the time for us really to put our foot on the gas with our coalition partners, in partnership with system stakeholders as well, and to really create the change that we all want to see going forward. There is a lot of work ahead for us. There's a lot of opportunity ahead for us, and now is the time for us to seize it.